My billionaire ex-husband had a meltdown at his Christmas gala, and the doctor who rushed in to save him was our secret son. They say time heals everything. But when my billionaire ex-husband collapsed at his Christmas gala, and the doctor who saved him was our secret son, I realized time doesn't heal, it reveals. That line doesn't belong on the cover of tomorrow's gossip columns. It belongs to me, to the life I thought I'd buried under silk tablecloths, champagne towers, and the facade of professional perfection. The chandeliers above the ballroom glittered like captured stars, each crystal catching a reflection of the woman I used to be. I was there that night, not as a guest, but as the creator of the spectacle, the woman who turned heartbreak into design, betrayal into art. Every wreath, every string of gold ribbon, every snow-dusted rose was mine. Even the stage where Damian Holt, the man who once vowed to love me forever, stood delivering his annual Christmas toast. He looked exactly as I remembered. Tailored confidence, silver at his temples, charm polished to perfection. To the world, he was the genius billionaire behind Holt Innovations, a man who built empires out of algorithms. To me, he was the man who walked away when love became inconvenient. Then, mid-speech, his words faltered. His smile trembled. A single champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor. For one unbearable second, time froze. Then the room erupted, voices shouting, heels clattering, the orchestra screeching to silence. "Call a doctor," someone cried. And through that chaos, a voice rose steady, sure, cutting through the panic. "Is greater than, I'm a doctor. Move back, please." I turned, and the world stopped spinning. Ethan, my son, my secret, the child I raised alone, the man I thought I'd protected from this very moment, was kneeling beside the father who never knew he existed. The lights caught the edge of his hospital badge as he leaned over Damian, his hands moving with practiced calm. And I stood there, breathless, unable to decide whether fate was cruel or poetic, because in that glittering, broken ballroom, the past I'd buried 26 years ago had just come back to life. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. I've missed you all so much. It's been a tough ride with some technical issues, but by God's grace, we're getting everything back on track. Thank you for sticking with me. Your support means everything. Before we begin, I want to say a little prayer over everyone watching, especially the women. To the women, may God strengthen you, comfort you, and fill your heart with peace and favor. To the men, may God guide you, bless your efforts, and give you wisdom in all you do. And may God's protection rest on every single one of you. Amen. If you're ready for today's story, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. My USA and UK family, I see you. And please watch till the end, because tomorrow I'll be dropping another story you wouldn't want to miss. Now, let's get into the story. But to understand how we ended up in that room, how a billionaire's heart stopped under the lights I designed, you'd have to go back to the night he left me standing in the rain with nothing but a promise and a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. That night is a ghost I thought I'd buried. But ghosts have a way of crashing parties, especially the ones wearing tuxedos. The ballroom was still echoing with the ghost of music when the paramedics burst through the gilded doors. The violins had long since gone silent, but the air still hummed with panic and perfume and the metallic sting of fear. Damian lay motionless beneath the chandelier. I'd chosen 1,000 glittering prisms, catching the strobe of the emergency lights as if mocking my sense of perfection. The crowd had thinned to clusters of stunned guests, their sequined gowns and tailored suits now smeared with confusion. Someone was crying softly near the dessert table. Someone else was taking a video, because that's what people do now, document tragedy for proof they were close enough to witness it. "Clear the space, please," one of the EMTs barked. Ethan's voice still rang in my ears, calm and commanding. Pulse weak but present. Then, the shock of the defibrillator, the jolt, the collective gasp, the flutter of Damian's eyelids before they rolled back, and now, a mechanical rhythm, steady beeps from the portable monitor. He was alive. For now, they lifted him onto the stretcher, white linen wrapping around the man who once wrapped promises around me. His face was ashen, all arrogance stripped away, leaving behind something hauntingly human. His hand, those same hands that once built empires out of code and lies, hung limp off the gurney until an EMT tucked it gently inside the sheet. Cameras flashed. Journalists, donors, board members, all suddenly remembering that tragedy makes for good publicity, is greater than... He collapsed mid-speech. Cardiac event, probably. Someone said it was stress. Or maybe karma. The words rippled through the room, each rumor sharper than the last. And then I heard it, the line that turned the chaos into ice. Is greater than that young doctor he saved his life. My breath caught. I turned, searching for Ethan, but he was already gone, swallowed by the paramedics, the flashing lights, the crowd. The world had shifted beneath my feet, and all I could do was stand there, silent, as they wheeled his father out into the night. "Miss Monroe!" A voice snapped me back. My assistant, Clara, 26, sharp, efficient, and completely unaware that she was watching my past unravel. Her red lipstick was smudged. Her clipboard trembled in her hands. "Security's asking if we should close down the ballroom. The guests are leaving." I nodded, my mouth too dry to form words. She hesitated. "Do you want to go to the hospital? You were right there." "No," I managed. "We need to finish here first." "Finish?" Her brow furrowed. "The gala's over. Not until it's cleaned." My voice came out flat, mechanical. Every candle snuffed out. Every glass collected. "We don't leave ruins behind." Clara blinked, uncertain, but didn't argue. She began directing the staff, her voice brisk over the hum of whispers. I turned back to the ballroom. My ballroom. It looked nothing like the pristine masterpiece I'd built. Champagne flutes lay shattered like broken dreams. Poinsettias drooped, petals crushed beneath designer heels. The grand staircase, once glowing with soft golden light, was littered with programs stamped with the Holt Foundation's embossed logo. Innovation, humanity, hope. How ironic. I reached for one of the programs. Damian's face smiled up at me from the back page, confident, untouchable. The headline beneath read, "Building the Future, One Heartbeat at a Time." My fingers trembled. I let the paper fall. Somewhere behind me, I heard Damian's business partner, Charles DeWitt, on the phone, his voice slicing through the tension like a blade. "Yes, he's being transported now. Midtown General. Get the PR team on standby. No statements yet, we can't afford another scandal." Another scandal. The phrase burned through me. I knew the kind of damage control Charles meant. Keep the investors calm, the shareholders reassured, the headlines polished. Image first, truth last. The same order Damian always lived by. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of pine garlands and fear. It was all too familiar, the choreography of crisis, the mask of control. Clara returned a few minutes later, her heels echoing on the marble floor. "Most of the guests have left," she said softly. "The press is waiting outside. They're asking for a statement from the event team." "Tell them no comment," I said. "This is a medical emergency, not a media opportunity." She nodded but lingered, uncertain. "You should go home, Isabella. You look pale." "I'll stay until they're done." I gestured toward the staff clearing glasses. "We'll need a damage report in the morning." Clara hesitated again, her expression softening. "You did everything right tonight. The design was perfect." Perfect. The word twisted inside me. Nothing about tonight was perfect. As the last guests trickled out, silence reclaimed the ballroom. Only the faint hum of the HVAC and the clink of glass remained. I walked to the center of the floor where Damian had fallen. The parquet was slick with spilled champagne, reflecting the chandelier's fractured light like tears on glass. For 20 years, I dreamed of standing this close to him again, imagining what I'd say if I ever had the chance. I never pictured it like this. I crouched down and brushed my fingers over the spot where his cufflink had come loose. A tiny silver circle engraved with the Holt Innovations logo, polished, impersonal, perfect. I slipped it into my pocket before I could think better of it. Through the open doors, I could see the swirl of red and blue lights outside. Snow had begun to fall fine, weightless flakes melting on the warm pavement. It was beautiful in the cruelest way. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over Ethan's contact. I wanted to call him, to tell him something, anything, that I was proud of him, that I was sorry he'd been dragged into this, that the man he'd just saved was the same one who'd once chosen a company over a family. But my hand wouldn't move. He didn't know. And he couldn't not yet. By the time the last staff member had gone, it was past midnight. The ballroom looked skeletal, bare tables, half-wilted florals, a faint trace of glitter still clinging to the air. I sat alone at one of the round tables, the white linen stained with wine and shadow. My reflection stared back from a broken ornament on the floor, distorted, fractured. That was when the first wave of exhaustion hit, followed by something colder. Guilt. I had known. When the Holt Foundation approached Maison Monroe for the Gala contract, the name at the top of the client list wasn't a surprise. Damian Holt. I'd seen it, felt the sting, and told myself it didn't matter. It was just business. Just another client. But deep down, I'd wanted to see him again to prove that I wasn't the girl he'd left behind in a leaky apartment with a baby on the way. I wanted him to see what I'd built from the ashes he left. And tonight, the universe had delivered that moment, just not the way I expected. Miss Monroe. Clara's voice was hesitant again. The car's waiting outside. I looked up, blinking away the haze. Thank you, Clara. Go home. Get some rest. What about you? I'll lock up. She nodded, reluctant but obedient, and disappeared through the double doors. The heavy gold curtains swayed in her wake, closing me in with the ghosts of the night. For a while, I just sat there, listening to the hum of the city beyond the glass. The Waldorf always felt timeless, like stepping inside a snow globe. But tonight, even the marble walls seemed to breathe the kind of silence that remembers everything. My phone buzzed on the table. Ethan. My heart leapt before I could stop it. I answered, forcing my voice steady. Ethan? Hey, Mum. His tone was calm but tired, that clipped professionalism doctors use when they're running on adrenaline and caffeine. I'm at Midtown General. I swallowed. How's the patient? He's stable, he said. We've got him in cardiac observation. They think it was a severe arrhythmia, maybe stress-induced. He's lucky I was there. Lucky. The word hollowed me out. That's good, I managed. You did well, sweetheart. There was a pause on the line. I could hear the hum of hospital machines in the background, a faint murmur of nurses. Then Ethan spoke again, slower this time. Mum, I think you should know something about him. Every nerve in my body went still. Ethan. He said something just before they sedated him. Another pause. He kept asking for someone named Isabella. The air left my lungs. Ethan continued, oblivious to the storm tearing through me. Do you know him? Holt, I mean. Damian Holt. You worked events for him before, right? I closed my eyes. The truth was a weight pressing against my ribs. Yes, I knew him. Knew the way his voice sounded when he promised forever. Knew the silence that followed when he took it back. But all I said was, no, sweetheart. Just another client. Ethan hesitated. All right. You sound tired. Get some rest. Okay? I'll check in tomorrow. Of course, I whispered. Tomorrow. He hung up, leaving me alone with the ringing silence. I stared at my reflection in the window. The woman staring back looked composed, successful, untouchable. But beneath that veneer, my heart was shaking. Outside, the last of the snow was settling over the city, blanketing the chaos beneath a fragile calm. Somewhere across Manhattan, Damian lay in a hospital bed, alive because of the son he never knew he had. And that son, our son, was calling me Mum while saving his father's life. Fate, it seemed, wasn't finished yet. I pressed my hand to the glass, the cold biting my skin, and whispered the only words I could find. Is greater than, no, not tonight. Then I turned off the lights, leaving the ballroom and the ghosts that came with it in the dark. New York City, 1999. Back when the skyline still shimmered with hope instead of cynicism. Back when I still believed that love could rewrite the future. I was 21, a design student on scholarship at Parsons, juggling sketches, exams, and a part-time job at a boutique hotel in Soho. I arranged flowers for events, ironed linens, and pretended I didn't envy the women in pearls who floated through the lobby. One evening, just before Christmas, he walked in. Damian Holt. He wasn't a billionaire then, just another man in a tailored suit that looked too expensive for his age. But even then, there was something about him. That quicksilver confidence. That air of someone already living a few years ahead of everyone else. He carried a laptop bag and the faint scent of cedar and ambition. He was in town for a startup conference, pitching what he called a revolution in digital human connectivity. I didn't understand a word of it, but his voice made me believe he could build anything. "Nice setup," he said, nodding at the poinsettia arrangement I was struggling to balance on a marble counter. I laughed nervously. "You mean the one that's about to collapse?" He reached over and steadied the vase before it tipped. Sometimes brilliance just needs better support. That was Damian, always the savior in a tailored suit. He came down to the lobby every night that week, always at the same time, always with some excuse. "The Wi-Fi's better here. I needed coffee. You're better company than my laptop." We started talking between check-ins and room service calls. He told me about his company, Holt Innovations, how he was developing software that would connect people across the world through instant communication. He said it would change everything. I told him about my designs, my dream of one day creating spaces that made people feel something again. "You design emotions," he'd said one night, smiling that impossible smile. "And I design the technology to connect them. Seems like a good partnership." That was the beginning. Our first date wasn't really a date. He invited me to a rooftop above his rented loft in Tribeca. The city stretched beneath us like a promise, lights, sirens, a pulse that matched our own. He brought takeout. I'd brought sketch paper. We talked until the sun rose, trading secrets like currency. He told me his parents had never believed in him. I told him mine had never had the chance to. He called me Bella. Said it like a secret. Said it like a prayer. We fell fast and recklessly, as only people in their 20s can. We were both building something, he out of code, me out of color, and we mistook our shared hunger for destiny. There were nights we'd end up at his apartment, surrounded by screens glowing with blue light, him coding and me sketching beside him. He'd pause sometimes to watch me draw, tracing the air above the page like he was memorizing me. "You're going to change the world, Bella," he'd whisper. "And when you do, I want to be there." I believed him. By spring, Holt Innovations had secured funding. Investors called him the next big thing. His phone buzzed constantly. His smile turned sharper, and his nights grew shorter. But he still made time for me, or said he tried to. Then summer came, and with it, the test I never saw coming. I was late. Then later, a pregnancy test confirmed what my trembling hands already knew. For a week, I rehearsed what I'd say. When I finally told him, he just stared. His face, once all light, went blank. "Are you sure?" he asked, as if I'd miscalculated a formula. "Yes, Damian, I'm sure." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the small apartment. "This can't happen now. I'm just Bella. I'm on the edge of something. The board is watching me. The investors." I cut him off. "It's not something, Damian. It's someone." He stopped pacing. For a second, I saw the boy I'd fallen for flicker through the one who'd whispered about futures on rooftops. Then his jaw tightened. "I can't be a father right now," he said quietly. "The board wouldn't understand. I need to focus. You know what this means for us, for me. For me." That was the first time I realized us was never really part of his equation. I remember the sound of the city outside, the honking, the laughter, life going on while mine cracked open. "You said you wanted to be there when I changed the world," I said, voice shaking. "But I guess the world doesn't include this, does it?" He didn't answer. He just stared out the window, at the skyline he loved more than anything real. He left that night. No dramatic goodbye, no promise to return. Just silence and a note that said, "I'm sorry. You deserve more than I can give." The next morning, I stood outside his building in the rain. the ink from the note smudged against my palm. My heart beat beneath my ribs, like something trying to escape. I waited for him to come back. He didn't. So I learned to stop waiting. I finished school, worked 2 jobs, sold sketches for rent money, and when my son was born, I named him Ethan Monroe. My name, my legacy, every sleepless night, every tear, every design that would one day build my empire came from that choice. Because when Damian walked away, he didn't just abandon me. Is greater than he abandoned the man our son would become. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender and rain, the kind of calm scent I'd chosen years ago to keep chaos at bay. But that night, peace felt like a lie. The city outside still glittered with leftover holiday lights, but inside, everything felt dimmer. My hands were steady only because I'd trained them to be. The knock came just after midnight. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there, still in his hospital scrubs, his white coat draped over one arm, a faint streak of someone else's life still marking his wrist. His face, usually so open and warm, was tight with something I couldn't quite name. "Hey, Mom," he said softly. "Sorry, I didn't want to wake you. I wasn't asleep." I lied, stepping aside. "You look exhausted." He dropped his coat on the back of a chair and sank onto the couch. Long night. I wanted to ask if the man he'd saved was alive. I wanted to pretend I didn't already know the answer. Instead, I poured him tea. "You did good tonight, didn't you?" He hesitated, eyes fixed on the steam rising from his cup. "I don't know. Maybe." Then, almost to himself, he looked at me like he knew me. The words hit harder than he could imagine. My heart stuttered. "Who?" "The man who collapsed. Damian Holt. You've probably heard of him." I forced a careful smile. "You've seen him on television. That's all." He nodded slowly, but his brow stayed furrowed. "Maybe." It just felt strange, like déjà vu. He leaned back against the couch, exhaustion settling into his bones. Even in that moment, with shadows under his eyes and hair still damp from the cold, he looked so much like Damian that I had to turn away for a breath. The same sharp jawline, the same stubborn curve of his mouth when he was thinking. "So, tell me," I said, trying to sound light, "does saving billionaires earn you extra credit in your residency?" That earned a grin. "If only. No, just another night at the ER. 1 second I'm treating a cyclist. The next I'm elbow deep in cardiac arrest in a ballroom." "You handled yourself like a pro," I said. He laughed. "You weren't there." "I was," I murmured before catching myself. "Well, not there. I saw the coverage." He didn't catch the slip. Thank God. Ethan had always been quick, but he wasn't suspicious. He'd grown up trusting me too much. He stretched, wincing. "Trauma medicine wasn't supposed to be this intense. You thrive under pressure," I reminded him. "Yeah, maybe too much." He glanced around the room, at the framed sketches and photographs of the events I'd designed. "You know, Mom, sometimes when I'm in surgery, I think about how you used to draw floor plans, the way you'd arrange a space so every angle felt balanced. It's kind of the same thing, except my space just happens to be inside a human body." I smiled faintly. "That's the most morbid compliment I've ever received." He grinned. "I mean it. You taught me how to see patterns, how to stay calm when everything's falling apart. I wouldn't have made it through med school without you." My throat tightened. He had no idea how literal that was. When he was born, I'd promised him 2 things: that he would never know shame, and that he would never know absence. I'd kept both, even when it meant working nights, skipping meals, or selling my designs to pay rent. There were years when I'd drawn on paper napkins in diners, sending out portfolio samples while Ethan slept in a stroller beside me. I'd watched him grow in the quiet hours between deadlines and exhaustion, his laughter the only thing that reminded me I'd made the right choice. He was my proof that love could survive abandonment, that broken things could still build something whole. "Mom?" His voice pulled me back. He was watching me carefully, his doctor's gaze softening into that of a son. "You okay? You seem somewhere else." "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired." He nodded, unconvinced. "You know, For someone who's built an empire out of planning perfect events, you're a terrible liar. That made me laugh. Occupational hazard. I can fake joy with centerpieces, but not with people. Maybe that's why your designs work, he said quietly. You don't fake anything real. I looked at him, then really looked. His eyes were the color of midnight coffee, the same as mine. Everything else was his father's, and though I tried to ignore it, I couldn't help wondering if Damian had recognized it too, even for a second. We talked for a while longer about his rotations, his impossible attending physician, the holidays he'd probably spend on call. It was easy, almost normal, but underneath the words there was tension, a hum of something neither of us dared name. When he finally stood to leave, he hesitated by the door. Mom? Yes? He rubbed the back of his neck. I think I've seen that man before, Holt, not just on TV. There was something in his eyes tonight. I can't explain it. I forced a calm breath. You're exhausted, Ethan. Your mind's connecting dots that don't exist. Yeah, he said with a soft laugh. You're probably right, but I saw it, the flicker of unease behind his smile. He hugged me before leaving, a quick, warm squeeze that lingered just long enough to break my composure. I'm proud of you, I whispered. He smiled. I know. Night, Mom. After he left, the silence felt heavier. I wandered through the apartment, turning off lights, each click echoing like punctuation in a story I'd hoped would stay unwritten. I paused at his childhood photo on the mantel, a 6-year-old boy holding a paper star he'd made in kindergarten. Beneath it, in my handwriting, reach higher than the world tells you to. He always had, but the truth was reaching back now, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep it contained. The TV was still on, sound muted, the glow flickering against the window. I reached for the remote, intending to turn it off until the headline flashed across the screen. Billionaire Damian Holt in stable condition after onstage collapse. The world seemed to tilt. They showed his photograph older, yes, but still the same man. The same sharp gaze, the same mouth that once whispered promises he never kept. And beneath the image, the words that cut deeper than they should have. Expected to make a full recovery. My breath caught. Behind the glass reflection, I saw myself older, wiser, but still tethered to the past I'd sworn to bury. That was when my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. That's the man from tonight. I stared at the message for a long moment, my pulse thudding in my ears. Then, with trembling fingers, I typed back 3 words I barely recognized as my own. Me. Yes, that's him. The phone slipped from my hand and landed softly on the couch. Outside, the city glittered on, indifferent. Inside, 20 years of silence finally began to crack. The smell of antiseptic always unnerved me, too clean, too sharp, like it was trying to scrub away things that couldn't be erased. I told myself I was there for Ethan, not Damian. That was the line I repeated from the moment I stepped out of the cab to the second the automatic doors slid open at Midtown General. I'd even said it out loud to the driver, as if speaking it would make it true. But lies don't lose their edge just because they're whispered in good faith. The hospital hummed with the quiet chaos of a city that never slept, orderlies pushing gurneys, nurses murmuring into headsets, fluorescent lights humming like anxious thoughts. I tightened my scarf and tried to blend in, though my heels clicked too loudly against the linoleum. Each step brought back memories I'd spent decades burying. A different hospital, a smaller room. White walls, white sheets, white noise. And me, 21, terrified, clutching my belly and a folded note from a man who had promised forever but left me holding silence instead. Back then, I'd watched the rain blur against a cracked window, wondering if he was somewhere thinking of me, wondering if he'd ever know the sound of his son's first cry. He didn't. He'd chosen not to. I followed the hallway toward the ICU, my heart pounding harder with every step. I could hear my son's voice in my head, calm and sure. He looked at me like he knew me, Mum. Now I understood why. As I turned the corner, a woman in a charcoal blazer stopped mid-stride. She blinked in disbelief. Miss Monroe? My name hung in the sterile air. She looked familiar, though I couldn't place her right away. Sharp features, a practiced smile, the kind of poise that came from years of standing behind power. "I'm sorry," I said, instinctively guarded. "Do I know you?" "I'm Julia Crane," she said. "Mr. Holt's executive assistant." The sound of his name hit like a bruise. She took a step closer, her voice lowering. "He'd want to see you." The world seemed to tilt. "That's impossible." "I assure you it's not. He's awake, disoriented, but asking for you. For a heartbeat." I couldn't breathe. The man who had spent 20 years pretending I didn't exist now wanted to see me. "I think you're mistaken," I said, forcing composure I didn't feel. "I'm here for my son. He's one of the attending doctors." Julia's expression softened. "Dr. Monroe? Yes. He's remarkable. Saved Damian's life." My pulse stumbled. Saved his life. "Excuse me," I managed, brushing past her before the floor swallowed me whole. I found a quiet corner near the observation window overlooking the ICU. Beyond the glass, monitors blinked like restless stars. Damian lay pale against the white sheets, his chest rising and falling with the slow rhythm of survival. He looked smaller, somehow still commanding even in weakness, but the invincibility was gone. His skin was the color of ivory paper, his hair threaded with silver. I told myself it meant nothing. That time had turned him into someone I no longer recognized. But seeing him like that vulnerable, human was more disarming than I expected. I stood there till a familiar voice cut through my fog. "Mum?" "Ethan." I turned. He was standing just a few feet away, still in his scrubs, stethoscope hanging loose around his neck. Surprise flickered across his face. "You came." His tone wasn't accusing, just relieved. "I wanted to see you," I said. "Make sure you're okay." "I'm fine, just running on fumes." He smiled faintly. "You didn't have to come all the way here." "I know." He looked toward the glass, following my gaze. "That's him, the patient. Damian Holt," I said quietly, the name heavy on my tongue. "Yeah, he's awake now. Asked to see his doctor." He sighed. "I should probably head in before the nurses start paging me again." He touched my shoulder gently before walking toward the ICU doors, and I stayed rooted in place, caught between two lives colliding on the other side of a pane of glass. Inside, I watched my son step up to the bedside professional, confident, unaware that fate was watching from the hallway. "Good afternoon, Mr. Holt," he said. "How are you feeling?" Damian turned his head slightly, eyes squinting under the fluorescent lights. His voice was hoarse, threadbare. "Like I got hit by my own stock prices." Ethan smiled politely. "That's the medication talking." He checked the monitors, adjusted the IV, every movement calm and assured. I recognized that precision. It was mine, passed down through years of quiet, disciplined grit. Then came the moment that shattered the stillness. Ethan glanced at the chart clipped to the bed. "If you need anything, just let the nurses know. I'm Dr. Monroe, by the way. Ethan Monroe." The sound of our name filled the room. Damian froze. His pulse monitor beeped faster, betraying him. "Monroe?" he repeated, the word rasping from his throat. "Yes, sir," Ethan said, oblivious to the storm brewing in front of him. "I'm part of the trauma team." Damian's gaze lingered on him too long, scanning his face as if reading a memory written in bone. For a moment, recognition flickered a spark of something dangerous and half-remembered. His eyes softened, then narrowed again, uncertain. He didn't know. Not yet. But some part of him felt it. Ethan excused himself after a few minutes, promising to return with an update. The door swung open, and he stepped back into the hall. "You look pale," he said, noticing me. "I'm fine," I whispered. "Go home. Rest." He nodded, tired but trusting, and disappeared down the corridor. I turned back to the glass. Damian was staring at the ceiling, his fingers twitching against the sheets. Then he shifted, motioning weakly for Julia. She leaned in close as he whispered something. She nodded once, taking notes on her phone. I didn't need to hear it to know. A minute later, Julia stepped into the hallway, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Holt asked me to look into something," she said carefully. I'm sorry. I need to. It's fine, I said, cutting her off. You have work to do. I waited until she was gone before looking through the glass one last time. Damian's lips moved, barely audible, but I could see them form the words, is greater than, find out everything about that doctor. Monroe, did you say? The air left my lungs. He was going to find out, and when he did, there'd be no more hiding, no more pretending that the past hadn't come full circle under those unforgiving lights. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, subject line, Holt Foundation Inquiry. I almost deleted it. My inbox overflowed daily with clients, vendors, press requests, names and deals that kept Maison Monroe afloat. But something about that one froze my hand above the trackpad. The sender, Julia Crane. Of course, it had been 2 days since the hospital. 2 days since I'd watched Damian's chest rise and fall beneath sterile lights, while my son, their son, walked away with no idea what blood connected them. I hadn't expected to hear from anyone in his orbit again. The email was brief, polished to corporate precision. Is greater than, Mr. Holt would like to speak with you regarding a private matter. He requests discretion and can accommodate your schedule. Tomorrow, your studio. I read it 3 times before I let out the laugh that wasn't really a laugh at all. Of course he would summon me like it was 20 years ago. Of course he'd assume I'd come running, but I didn't decline. I told myself it was closure, that if I looked him in the eye just once, I could finally put the past where it belonged. The truth? I was lying to myself again. By the next afternoon, the studio was immaculate because perfection was my armor. Every bolt of silk rolled tight, every candle wick trimmed, every flower stem aligned to the millimeter. Maison Monroe's glass walls reflected the city's late light like liquid gold. Clara had offered to stay, but I'd sent her home early. Client meeting, I'd said. Private, at 5:47 p.m. The elevator chimed. I turned before the doors fully opened, already bracing myself. And there he was, Damian Holt. He looked both older and exactly the same time had carved lines around his eyes, but the arrogance in his posture was untouched. The black coat, the silk scarf, the faint cologne that once clung to my skin for days, it all came rushing back like a cruel echo. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The air between us hummed with 20 years of silence. He broke it first. You should have told me. I almost laughed. That's your opener? His jaw tightened. I mean it, Isabella. So do I. I crossed my arms. You made it clear you didn't want to know. Remember? He stepped farther into the room, moving slowly, still recovering but every inch the man who commanded boardrooms. Julia found your company, he said. Maison Monroe. Impressive. His gaze lingered on the sketches pinned to the wall. You built this from nothing. I had to. And Ethan. His voice faltered for the first time. He's remarkable. My stomach twisted. Don't. He ignored the warning. He saved my life. Unknowingly, I said. And that's how it stays. He turned to me then, eyes burning with something between shame and need. I deserved to know him. I met his gaze. Steady. You forfeited that right before he was born. The silence between us thickened. Rain began to patter faintly against the glass, soft and relentless. He took a slow breath. I never stopped thinking about you. I stared at him, disbelief cutting through the fog. Don't rewrite history, Damian. You didn't think about me, you thought about your reputation, about shareholders, about the press. That's not true, really, because the man who walked away 26 years ago didn't even leave a forwarding number. He flinched. The sound of the rain filled the space between our words. I was scared, he admitted quietly. I thought I could build something first, make a life that could hold you properly. By the time I realized what I'd lost, it was too late. I almost pitied him. Almost. You had a choice, I said. You chose ambition. He looked down, hands gripping the back of a chair like it was the only thing keeping him upright. I almost died last week, he said, voice rough. When I woke up, the first face I saw was his, my son's, and I didn't even know it. That kind of clarity changes things. I let out a slow breath. Near-death experiences don't erase 20 years of absence. He stepped closer, his voice softening. Maybe not, but maybe it gives me a second chance. My pulse stuttered. For a fraction of a second, I saw the man I'd fallen for, the one who used to trace dreams across my palms and promise forever. But forever had come and gone. Does he know? He asked. No. Will you tell him? No. His brow furrowed. Isabella. He's happy, I said sharply. He's proud of who he is. He doesn't need your name to make that true. Damian's gaze darkened. He deserves the truth. So did I snapped. And that never stopped you. He fell silent, guilt flickering behind his composure. For a moment, the billionaire was gone, and all that remained was the boy who'd once kissed me under a rain-soaked awning, trembling with the same fear that now ruled his eyes. I can't change the past, he said finally, but I want to make it right. I exhaled slowly. Don't confuse regret with redemption, Damian. The words hung in the air like smoke, sharp, undeniable. He nodded once, eyes glinting with something like surrender. Then he turned toward the elevator, each step echoing through the hollow quiet. When the doors slid shut, I was left alone in the golden light, surrounded by everything I'd built to survive him. My hands trembled only after he was gone, and somewhere deep down, beneath the anger and the armor, a voice whispered the truth I didn't want to face. The past wasn't finished with me yet. No, the hospital hallways always hummed after midnight, machines breathing, monitors whispering, the faint pulse of life moving under fluorescent light. Ethan had grown used to the rhythm of it. Predictable, controlled, but ever since the gala, the air carried a different tension. Every conversation felt slightly out of tune. Every glance lingered too long. It started with whispers. Did you hear? Holt's recovery is remarkable. They say that young Dr. Monroe saved him. I heard Holt made a sizable donation to trauma services. Quietly, of course. Ethan tried to ignore it. Gossip was as common in hospitals as coffee cups and exhaustion. But something about the way people said, Holt softly, reverently, made his stomach twist. By Friday morning, the rumors solidified into fact. His department head, Dr. Laskin, pulled him aside between rounds. Congratulations, Dr. Monroe. You've caught the attention of some powerful people. Ethan blinked. Sir, Holt Innovations just made a private endowment to the trauma unit. They specified it was inspired by your work. Apparently, the man's grateful you saved his life. Ethan froze. That's generous. It's more than generous, Laskin said, eyeing him. It's personal. Personal. The word felt heavy, out of place. Ethan nodded, forced a polite smile, and went back to his rounds, but his mind wouldn't stop spinning. Damian Holt, the billionaire who'd collapsed under the chandeliers, the man whose pulse he'd steadied, whose face, now that he thought of it, had stirred something unsettlingly familiar, and his mother's reaction afterward, the way she'd looked at him when the name appeared on the news ticker. Too long, too quiet. That evening, he drove across the city to her apartment, the skyline glowing like 1,000 unspoken thoughts. When Isabella opened the door, she looked startled but composed, as always, the queen of calm. Ethan, she said softly, you didn't call. I needed to talk to you. She stepped aside. Come in. The living room smelled like vanilla and rain, comforting but tense. A half-finished design board lay across her coffee table, sketches of a winter gala that looked almost identical to the one that had imploded days ago. Ethan didn't sit. Why didn't you tell me you knew Damian Holt? Her hand stilled on the edge of a photo frame. What makes you think I do? He gave a short, humorless laugh. Because he made a personal donation in my name. Because he looked at me like I wasn't a stranger. Because when I said his name that night, you looked like you'd seen a ghost. Isabella's composure flickered. He's a public figure, Ethan. Everyone knows him. Not like that. She turned away, walking to the window. Please, don't do this. Do what? He demanded. Ask why my mother's acting like the man I just saved is more than a headline. She said nothing. The silence stretched until he could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. He softened his voice. Mom, what's going on? She turned then, eyes glistening. You're my entire world, Ethan. Every choice I've ever made was for you. That's not an answer. It's the only one I can give you right now. He stared at her, frustration rising. You've always said honesty matters most. It does. Then start living by it. Her breath caught. Ethan, please. Some truths don't heal. They just reopen what's already scarred. He swallowed hard, a knot tightening in his chest. Then, maybe I need to see the scars for myself. That night, long after she'd gone to bed, Ethan couldn't sleep. His mind raced back to her words, the way she trembled when he mentioned Holt. He wandered through the apartment quietly, every shadow alive with memory. He'd grown up in these rooms, playing among paint samples, falling asleep to the scratch of her pencils. She'd built everything from nothing. Alone. But alone suddenly felt like a lie. In her closet, high on a shelf, sat an old cardboard box labeled Archives. He'd seen it 100 times, never thought twice. Tonight, he pulled it down. Inside were fragments of another life's sketches, faded receipts, photos, a flyer for an early tech conference, Holt Innovations Building the Future, and at the bottom, folded, yellowed, and fragile, a torn photograph. A young woman in a sundress, smiling under a city skyline. Beside her, a man, sharp suit, familiar jawline, eyes that mirrored his own. Damian Holt. His breath hitched. He turned the photo over, reading the single line scrawled in his mother's handwriting, "Is greater than summer, 1999. Before everything changed, the world seemed to tilt beneath him. He rifled deeper, found a letter, half-creased and unsigned. "Is greater than I can't do this, Isabella. I can't risk everything. Please understand." Ethan's hands shook. He saw her in that moment not as the invincible mother he'd always known, but as a young woman standing in the rain with her heart breaking. And the man who'd walked away was the one he'd just brought back from the edge of death. The apartment door slammed against the wall as he stormed out, anger and betrayal colliding inside him. Isabella appeared in the hallway, robe clutched tight, eyes wide. "Ethan, what are you doing?" He held up the torn photograph. "All these years you lied to me." She froze, the color draining from her face. "Ethan, please." He stepped back, shaking his head. "No, don't. I spent my whole life believing he was dead, that he never existed, and all this time," his voice cracked, "you let me grow up wondering who I was." Tears welled in her eyes. "I did what I thought was right." "For who?" he shouted. "For me, or for you?" She reached out, but he stepped away. "Ethan, I can't even look at you right now." The words came out like shrapnel, cutting both of them. He left before she could stop him, the door slamming behind him with a sound that echoed through every year they'd shared. Isabella sank to the floor, clutching the photo he'd dropped, their faces frozen in a moment before the world fractured. Outside, snow began to fall again, silent and relentless, blurring the city lights into ghosts. And somewhere in the night, a son walked away from the only truth he'd ever known. The hospital suite was quiet, but not peaceful. The kind of silence that hummed beneath the skin, electric and raw. Damian Holt sat propped against the pillows, the pale winter light spilling through half-closed blinds, striping his face in silver and shadow. He looked smaller now, not the commanding figure who once filled boardrooms and magazine covers, but a man stripped of armor, tethered to machines that did his breathing for him. The empire builder reduced to flesh and regret. When the door opened, Ethan stepped inside. White coat, crisp, expression unreadable. Damian's eyes lifted. "Dr. Monroe." Ethan closed the door quietly behind him. "You can drop the title. You know who I am." The older man studied him, really studied him this time, and for a heartbeat, the resemblance was undeniable. The same jawline, the same focused stare, the same storm beneath the calm. Damian exhaled, his voice hoarse. "You look like her." Ethan didn't flinch. "You left her." His tone was flat, deliberate. "You left us." The words landed like a blade between them. Damian's hand trembled against the blanket. I know. Do you? Ethan asked. Because I don't think you understand what leaving means. She worked 3 jobs just to keep a roof over our heads. I grew up thinking my father was dead, and the first time I see you, you're collapsing under the lights of a ballroom she designed. Do you have any idea how cruel that is? Damian swallowed hard. I deserve that. Every word. I'm not here for your guilt, Ethan said. I just want to know why. Why was I never enough to even know about? Damian's gaze drifted toward the window. For a moment, he seemed far away, back in another time. I thought I was protecting my future, he said quietly. Back then, Holt Innovations was barely breathing. One scandal, one rumor, and everything I'd worked for would have burned. I told myself I was doing it for both of us, that walking away was mercy. Ethan stared, disbelief curdling into disgust. Mercy? Damian's voice cracked. Turns out, I wasn't protecting anything. I was destroying it before it even had a chance. The silence stretched again, heavy and suffocating. Then a voice came from the doorway, soft but sharp enough to cut through the tension. You're right about that. Both men turned. Isabella stood in the threshold, her posture elegant but her eyes rimmed with exhaustion. She hadn't planned to come. She told herself she wouldn't. But fate, as always, had other plans. Ethan stiffened. Mom, I need to say this, she said. Damian straightened in his bed, his pulse monitor beeping faster. Isabella, don't, she warned, crossing the room slowly. You don't get to say my name like it still means something. She stopped at the foot of his bed. For a moment, no one breathed. You should have told me, he said softly. She laughed under her breath, bitter and brittle. You made it clear you didn't want to know. Remember? I was young. I was scared. You were selfish. She snapped. You cared more about your reputation than the people who loved you. I begged you to stay. I told you there was a child. Your child, and you turned your back. Damian's voice broke. I never stopped thinking about you. Don't you dare romanticize it, she said, stepping closer. You don't get to rewrite 26 years with an apology. He met her gaze steadily, tears catching in the corners of his eyes. Maybe not, he whispered. But I can start with honesty. The air seemed to shift then, 3 lives suspended in a single, unbearable moment. Ethan stood between them, watching the 2 people who had shaped his entire existence without ever being in the same room together, the mother who'd sacrificed everything, and the father who'd walked away from it all. You want honesty? Isabella said. Fine. The truth is, I hated you. For years. Every Christmas, every birthday, every moment our son asked why his father wasn't there, I hated you. And then one day I stopped, not because I forgave you, but because I realized hate gives you power you don't deserve. Damian closed his eyes. You have every right. No, she said softly. You don't get to tell me what rights I have. Ethan's voice broke through the tension, low but firm. Enough. They both turned to him. He took a step forward, his expression calm but his eyes burning. You're both so caught up in what you lost that you can't see what's still standing right in front of you. Ethan, Isabella began. No, he said. I spent my whole life thinking my father was dead, and now I know he was just a coward. I spent my whole life believing my mother was invincible, and now I see she's just human. You both are. But here's the thing. He looked at Damian, voice steady now. The room went still. Even the machine seemed to pause. Damian's throat worked, emotion rising and breaking in his eyes. I don't deserve that kind of grace. No, Ethan said quietly. You don't. But maybe now you'll try to. Isabella's gaze softened. Pride and heartbreak tangled together. For a moment, none of them spoke. The years of silence, resentment, and unspoken love hung heavy, but something inside it shifted just slightly. The air between them no longer burned. It breathed. Damian wiped a trembling hand across his face. I don't expect either of you to forgive me, but if I get another chance, any chance, I want to make things right, even if it takes the rest of my life. Ethan nodded once. Then start by healing. The rest comes later. He turned to leave, and for the first time, Damian didn't stop him. Isabella lingered a moment longer, her fingers brushing the edge of the bed rail. "You nearly died, Damian. Don't waste what's left trying to rewrite the past. Live differently instead." He looked up at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Do you still hate me?" She hesitated, then shook her head slowly. "No, but I don't love you either." And with that, she turned and followed her son out the door. Damian watched them go, the sound of their footsteps fading into the hum of machines. Outside, in the corridor's pale light, Isabella exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Ethan looked at her, something gentler in his eyes now. "We're not done, you know," he said softly. "I know," she whispered. "But maybe for the first time we've started." And somewhere behind them, in a hospital room filled with ghosts and heartbeats, a man closed his eyes and silently promised that this time he wouldn't run. Winter had come back to Manhattan like an old song, soft, familiar, and a little sad. Snow dusted the rooftops and blurred the skyline into a watercolor of white and silver. The city moved slower in December. Even the taxis seemed to hush under the falling quiet. Inside her studio, Isabella Monroe worked alone, the faint hum of holiday music threading through the air. Her hands moved with mechanical grace, tying satin bows onto centerpieces for the hospital's annual charity gala. This one was different. This wasn't for billionaires in designer gowns or board members hungry for recognition. This was for children, patients of the Midtown General Pediatric Wing, a project funded by a new donation. The Ethan Monroe Pediatric Recovery Center. She had cried the first time she saw the name in print, not because of the recognition, but because of what it meant that something good had finally grown out of all that pain. Still, even surrounded by beauty, her heart was restless. She hadn't spoken to Damian since the confrontation in his hospital room. Ethan had kept his distance too busy, he'd said. She didn't blame him. Some wounds needed silence to heal. Snow drifted against the glass windows, glowing gold under the city lights. She took a deep breath and set down her scissors. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel tired. Then 3 soft knocks at the door. She turned, and her breath caught. Ethan stood there, his coat dusted with snow, his eyes gentler than she remembered. "Hey," he said, stepping inside. "Hey," she echoed, her voice small. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Ethan smiled a little crooked, the same way he had when he was a boy trying to hide his scraped knees. "I'm sorry," he said, "for how I left, for what I said." Her throat tightened. "You had every right." He shook his head. "Maybe, but I forgot that the truth isn't the same as blame. You did the best you could, Mom. Better than anyone had the right to expect." She tried to respond, but her voice broke instead. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her. For a heartbeat, she melted into him, the little boy she had raised, the man he had become. "I missed you," she whispered. "I never left," he said softly. "I just needed time to understand." When they pulled apart, the room felt lighter somehow, like the air itself had exhaled. Ethan's eyes drifted toward the glittering decor around them. "So this is your next masterpiece?" "Something like that," she said with a faint smile. "The hospital's new children's wing. It opens tonight." He nodded, his gaze thoughtful. "I heard who's funding it." Her fingers paused over a ribbon. "I didn't know until last week. He asked me if it was okay," Ethan said quietly. "I told him it wasn't about permission. It was about purpose." Isabella looked at him sharply. "You've spoken to him?" "A few times. He's trying, Mom. I don't know what comes next, but I think he finally understands what he lost." She didn't answer. There were no easy words for forgiveness, no map to navigate between history and healing. That evening, the gala came to life beneath crystal chandeliers and soft white lights. Snow fell outside in lazy spirals, clinging to the windows like lace. Children in small suits and bright dresses wandered among the guests, their laughter carrying above the murmur of conversation. Isabella stood near the entrance, her gown simple but elegant black silk with a hint of shimmer. She told herself this event was for the hospital, for the kids, for the future. But deep down, she knew she was waiting for something or someone, and then she saw him. Damian Holt stood by the far entrance, leaning lightly on a cane, his complexion pale but his eyes alive. He wore a dark suit, no tie, the faintest smile playing at his lips. For the first time in 20 years, he didn't look untouchable. He just looked human. Their eyes met across the room. The noise faded. For a moment, it was just them, two people with a lifetime between them and one fragile present moment holding them together. Ethan appeared beside her, his presence grounding. "He came," he murmured. "I see that. Are you okay?" She smiled faintly. "Ask me again in another 20 years. Ethan chuckled, then touched her hand before walking toward Damian. She watched as her son approached his father, the man who had been a stranger and a memory all at once. They spoke quietly. No grand gestures, no bitterness, just words between two men finally meeting without ghosts in the room. A few minutes later, Ethan gestured toward her. Damian hesitated, then nodded and began to cross the room. His steps were slow, but steady. When he stopped in front of her, she saw something different in his eyes. Not pride, not guilt, but gratitude. "You outdid yourself," he said softly. "It's beautiful." She glanced around the room, at the flickering lights and garlands of evergreen. "Beauty doesn't erase the past." "No," he said, "but maybe it can light the way forward." For once, she didn't argue. They stood together beneath a string of golden lights, watching Ethan laugh with a group of children near the stage. The boy who had been their secret now carried both of them in his heart. Isabella folded her arms, her gaze tender. "You know," she said, "there was a time I thought this night would never come, that we'd never be in the same room without breaking apart." Damian smiled faintly. "Maybe we had to break first to see what was worth keeping." They fell into silence, neither needing to fill it. Outside, the snow thickened, swirling like confetti in the glow of streetlights. At the end of the night, Ethan joined them again, his cheeks flushed, his eyes bright. The three of them stood together near the towering Christmas tree, its lights reflecting in the marble floor. No one spoke. There were no apologies left to make, no promises to break, just the soft hum of music and the quiet understanding that they had all survived something bigger than themselves. As the final guests began to leave, Isabella looked up at the twinkling lights and let the weight in her chest loosen. The past would always be there, etched into her like glass, but for the first time, it didn't hurt to breathe. In the final quiet, her voice carried like a thought into the air, is greater than. Some stories don't end in fairy tales. Some end in understanding, and that's enough. And as snow blanketed the city below, the three of them stood together, not as a broken family, not as ghosts of what might have been, but as something simpler, purer, and infinitely more human, survivors who had finally found peace beneath the falling snow. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out, and do well to click on the subscribe button and turn on notifications for the next story.